tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of. Now, anti-Semitism can come from any direction. Historically, it's often come from the far right. But today, there are always worries about that, but today it is the far left that is the predominant place that is fostering anti-Semitism. But a lot of the left has fallen into anti-Semitism because it has basically got a new religion. Of course, the left is still playing with the embers of Marxism, but they also have this new religion, the religion of intersectionality. And this is the religion in which the more oppression you can claim you've suffered, the better you are. Now, who could have foreseen that this would lead to an oppression Olympics in which people are desperate to claim that they're oppressed, and that a student at Berkeley must feel like the most oppressed person in the world, so that somebody being pursued by the Janjaweed militia in Sudan has nothing on them.
How can you be oppressed when you're leaving in a first world country? Like there are people walking for hours to get water, and you think you're oppressed because someone didn't call you by your pronouns. How ignorant should you be to think that?
As they enter their third year of lesbian dance theory. And I would have said make themselves unemployable, except it turns out there's masses of jobs for these people to go into. They all went into HR and Silicon Valley. But this oppression Olympics, you could already see, leaves the Jews in a very perilous position. And I said this many years ago. They already were trying to make the Jews the kind of super whites. And then you have the thing of, what are the things that the American left is obsessed by? And I've written about this in my last book, The War on the West. They're obsessed by several primordial sins: the sin of racism, the sin of colonialism, the sin of slavery. They are people of stupendous historical ignorance who believe, for instance, that only America ever enslaved anyone, and that, for instance, the Ottoman Empire, well, it's not really come across their plate.
Every country has its bad side and its good side, and history will always be written by the winners, so we don't really know the reality.
They imagine that the history of Britain or Europe is only to be looked at through the lens of colonialism, as if the Renaissance is nothing, you know. Well, they don't know what it is, so of course it's nothing. And on and on. A majority of young British people polled the other day said that they believed that the foundations of Britain were racist. And you see the same thing in the left in America, and particularly in the young left. They have got this new religion. They think everything is about these things. You simply have to find racism, find colonialism, and so on. And why do I mention this? Because it comes back to what I just mentioned about Vasily Grossman. There's an interesting twist that the American left is doing. I don't think I've said this before, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently. If Grossman is right, and I think he is, that what you accuse the Jews of, you're guilty of, what is it the American left, particularly the campus left, are doing? They are accusing the Jews of something that they believe they themselves are guilty of. As it happens, they're incorrect. They believe America is a racist society. They believe that America is a colonialist society. They believe that America is a white supremacist society. Now, all of this is rubbish. But they imagine this to be the case. We in the West are so far away from reality today. We are so far away from understanding the reality of evil. Hannah Arendt used this famous, awful phrase, the banality of evil, and she was completely wrong. Evil is a force that when you see it, You will never forget it. But Americans don't see evil like Israel saw on the 7th. When you do polls of young Americans asking if they'd fight for their country, or the figures are terrible, but they have no concept of ever needing to do that. They have no threat from Canada, yet. And it's the same in Europe. Most of Western Europe, less now in Eastern Europe since the Ukraine war. But the idea of what you're actually dealing with Hamas is just a different world.
I believe that's why many people in America and Europe have grown increasingly soft and overly tolerant. It seems as though they have lost touch with any sense of real fear, strong moral values, or belief in something greater than themselves. It's almost as if the absence of these foundational elements has led to a society that lacks the strength and discipline that once defined it.
In the world that somebody buying their morning frappuccino in a Starbucks can imagine. And this is one of the things that has startled me in the last 11 months, is one thing in particular has haunted me. Many things have, but one thing I can't get out of my head is the sheer lack of empathy. I can tell you, when I see a 19-year-old girl helping with collecting the body parts and doing it because it's her job. When I see a young man who spent months in Gaza, when I see these people on the front line, always I think of this thing: what are your contemporaries like in America? And these young men and women show up their American and British counterparts to such an extent they should be embarrassed. I'll just leave you with this thought. These people, these young men and women have seen things by the age of 20 that most Americans will not see by the time they're on their deathbed.